What's up guys, Jayztwocents here, and continuing on with what I promised you guys being some cheap Amazon PC parts I decided to take a look at. We're gonna move forward today with a CPU cooler. This is a part that I feel like so many people omit from their builds. People constantly are perfectly okay with just using the box cooler, and I think there's so much more with the way turbo boost logic works on both Intel and AMD that you can get out of your systems if you can just keep them cool. So today we're taking a look at a $35 cooler here off of Amazon from a brand called Vetru. Never heard of them before, but I figured this might be a good competitor for the extremely popular and inexpensive Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo, because this one right here features more cooling heat pipes as well as just a better aesthetic in my opinion. The all-new 5000D mid-tower airflow case from Corsair features an optimized front panel for maximum ventilation, while the integrated cable management and tempered glass side panel means you can show off more of your components and not your cable mess. To see the full list of specs and to learn more about the 5000D's flexible fan mounting options perfect for both air cooling and water cooling enthusiasts, follow the sponsored link in the description below. All right, so a couple of things that sort of drew my attention to this particular cooler as I was browsing through Amazon. I don't pay attention to a lot of the reviews on Amazon. A lot of them, I don't know if people realize, are bought and paid for by the brands themselves. They'll go up there and leave their own positive reviews. It's really difficult to kind of ascertain what's a real review as well as just a fake one up there, which is designed to make it look like it's a super popular item and everyone loves it. But this one is black. And one of the things that I feel like a lot of the cheap coolers, before we unbox it here, but one of the things I think a lot of the cheap coolers sort of lack is any sort of aesthetic. You'll have the bare copper heat pipe showing with the steel or aluminum, whatever the material is, heat fins, which just is ugly. But having this be a nice matte black, and being an RGB fan as well, gives you a little bit of aesthetic to bring to your build. Now this would pretty much compete directly with, again, the Cooler Master Hyper 212. There's been a lot of revisions to the Hyper 212 over the years, so I say that loosely because there is a black version of the Hyper 212, but the thing with the Hyper 212, and I've said that a million times now, is the price fluctuation of that cooler is constantly all over the place. You could get it as low as 25 bucks one day and then as high as $50 the next day. It's constantly fluctuating. But they do also make an ARGB fan version as well as a black heatsink for around $40 right now at the time of making this video, which I think makes this a direct comparison alternative to that. And some of you might be wondering, well then if it's the same price, why don't you just go with the Cooler Master? I'll talk about that in a second here. But some of the overall not aesthetics, but the dimensions here, it's 148 millimeters tall, so that'll clear any side panel that is at least 148 millimeters or larger. It's not a very tall cooler, so it should fit most of your chassis. 120 millimeter fan. It's a fan speed range of 800 to 1700 RPM, give or minus 10%. 30.8 dBA max, so that's going to be the fan noise against the heat sink at 1700 RPM. So if you're not running at full speed, the noise is obviously going to fluctuate. 21 to 52 CFM, that again is based on that RPM range. And then it says it has a static pressure of 3.61 mmH2O, which would make this a great fan for radiators, which would also make it a great fan for heat sinks because it has to be able to overcome the resistance. Bearing type is a hydraulic, which you're going to always find on the cheap fans because hydraulic bearings are the cheapest to manufacture. And then the weight, who cares? It does work with all your standard Intel and AMD sockets minus TR4. It's not going to work with TR4. But this also doesn't look like it works with X series from Intel. It's only got the LGA 1366 and 11 series chipsets on there. So let's go and take a look at what's inside. One of the reasons why I chose this particular cooler though, versus the Cooler Master, is simply the fact that it has 5 heat pipes. The Cooler Master Hyper 212 has 4. So this is giving us 1 extra heat pipe of cooling versus what the Cooler Master option is offering. And given the fact that CPUs today have that's actually a really high quality feeling fan. I wasn't really expecting that. If you saw my last video about the box of 6 RGB fans for 36 bucks, they had a very flimsy and very cheap feeling cage, but this one doesn't really feel that way. It definitely feels more robust. Anyway, and then here's all of our mounting stuff here. So we'll kind of talk about some of the build quality right here. My first thought was that I was concerned about the base. Oftentimes the base is an area that's super rough. They just machine it flat and leave it as is, but this actually feels like and looks like it has a nice refined process on there. But one of the things that gave me a little bit of concern when I was shopping for this online is the fact that the heat pipes do have a small gap between them. Now there is a heat sink plate on here that all the heat pipes are mounted to. The heat pipes are obviously shaved flat, so the metal is thinnest on the bottom where it touches the cooler or the CPU. That way you can get the best heat transfer. But because you do have a little bit of a gap in between, means that you're gonna be relying on the transfer of heat coming from this heat sink welded to or soldered to the heat pipes to transfer that. Now I did some research on the Hyper 212, and some of them are that way, and some of them are not. Some of them have the heat pipes butted right up against each other so that you don't have that gap. So that's my only point of concern for these CPUs that have high core counts. Now, if you've got a CPU that's got a lower core count, like a 4-core, 8-thread, 6-core, 12-thread, this probably isn't gonna matter. But I'm talking about your Ryzen CPUs that have 16 cores, 32 threads in your AM4 socket. That's one of the reasons why I chose this cooler, because it has 5 heat pipes, which would be better for that particular dense core count. But I'm a little concerned about those gaps. We will be testing that. The other thing that gives me a small reason for concern, but at least when I was shopping online, is they don't mention what process they use to make this black. Now we did a video where I took a standard steel cooler with copper heat pipes and painted it black to see how much the paint would actually insulate and hurt your transfer of heat. And we did find that there was about 5 degrees of increased temperature after painting the cooler versus just letting it be the bare metal. Now, when you see a black air cooler on the market, not necessarily the cheap ones, because again, I don't know exactly what the process of this one is. This doesn't feel like paint. This feels like it could be a ceramic or even potentially a Cerakote. When you see like the black Noctuas and the black Cooler Masters and stuff, they're not painted. People will constantly label them as painted black, but they're not painted. They are a heat transfer coating that happens to be black. Now, whether that is going to be ceramic, which is funny because ceramic is almost more of an insulator than actually heat transfer, but that's besides the point in this case, because I don't believe this is ceramic coated. I do believe this is probably a Cerakote, and Cerakote is actually really good at dissipating heat. As you can see on the top though, we do have the 5 heat pipes, all black fins. We've got notches cut out here to clear our tall RAM, which is great because I hate the fact that a lot of coolers nowadays are big and will interfere with tall RAM sticks, but that's not the case here. And then with our fan, we do have our ARGB pass-throughs. I call it pass-through because it does have a pigtail, which means you can plug a header into this and then another device into it, so it can keep the circuit going without occupying a header, and then you can't plug anything else into it unless you get a splitter. It's got its own built-in splitter. And then it is a 4-pin PWM standard plug on the end. So you can plug this into your motherboard, fan controller, whatever you're using. So you can kind of get an idea of what that looks like with the fan held up against it. Nice white fins on here to reflect the amount of light that'll be glowing through the hub. And then you can see what it looks like from the top right there. It's just all nice matte black. Such a nice matte black that even MKBHD himself would be proud at the level of matte black there is on this cooler. And then you can see you've got all of your mounting mechanism here. Now, like I said, this works with both AMD and Intel. And this is pretty awesome to see because it comes with your retaining clips here for your fan. It comes with 4 of them, which is nice. So if you wanted to get another one of these fans or use 2 of your own fans, you can set it up for push-pull, which would obviously be the most efficient. But what I like about this is the fact that the brackets for the mounts are already assembled. A lot of the air coolers, and again, I'm gonna throw Cooler Master under the bus here again, come with a ton of options, but they are just convoluted and difficult to make sense of in terms of setting them up. But as you can see, you've got your AMD brackets here, you've got your Intel brackets here, already assembled, making them really easy to install. You've got your backplate here. This one clearly appears to be specifically for Intel, and it looks to me like the AMD ones are just going to use the factory AMD backplate, which makes sense. No reason to replace it or remove it. It's already an insulated backplate that is there. Might as well use it. So you've got your Intel backplate here, which has a rubber isolating standoff with two-sided tape, so it'll stick to the bottom of the motherboard. And then you just use these two screws on the bottom here, mount your bracket to it, mount it down to your system, and then you are good to go. So let's go ahead and get this rigged up on my Threadripper 5900X test bench system. We'll do a test with our 240mm AIO. I don't expect this to be anywhere near the cooling capability of a 240 liquid cooler, but I kind of want to see what the comparison is of that. One, it's already installed, might as well see. And then two, get it all mounted up and see what the differences are. All right, so here we go. Here's Cinebench R20 right now running on a loop. We got Ryzen Master open. Forgive me while I kind of work the camera here. We've got it sitting at about 74 to 75 C right now under load. It is looping, and it's been looping for a while. This is running a Fractal Design 240mm AIO on my AMD Ryzen 5900X. So this is all factory. There's no sort of PBO enabled. There's no sort of overclock. The fan profile is set to pretty much standard on the fans and on the cooler. So I'm kind of giving you sort of a baseline of how it's going to compare to an air cooler that, you know, or a water cooler that's north of $100. If we take a look at the core clocks, you can see they are pretty much at, hopefully you guys can see, they're pretty much at 4.25 to 4.3 all core. You can see the core selection is also set to OS, not OC. So this is pretty much just the Ryzen power profile built into Windows, no sort of ASUS multi-core enhancement taking place. It's all just completely stock out of the box. We just hit 76, 75. So that's pretty much expected. Now, typically with this bench, we'll run an overclock at about 4445 all core, and then it will get much closer to 85C without the fans ramping up. And we're not doing that obviously with this air cooler. I don't think this air cooler is going to necessarily be capable of a major overclock. And the reason why I'm even bringing this up and I'm showing you the core clocks and stuff is because remember, with all the modern CPUs, they have kind of like a turbo boost built into them to where the lower the temperatures, the higher the core clock will go and the longer it will maintain that core clock without fluctuating all over the place. So that's one of the reasons why I'm even showing you this. So it looks like we're sitting at about 75C right now. Like I said, it's been running long enough so that this AIO has had plenty of time to heat saturate and get about as warm as it's going to get. Something else I want to mention too is the setting up of this air cooler is really, really simple. Like I showed you guys, the base here just screws right into the bottom with those 4 screws on the bottom, as you can see. I think it's all out of focus. Sorry, I'm still here by myself. But as you can see, they just screw into those with those 4 screws, and it's really simple because the retainer hold downs are all C-clipped in with the springs and all that, so you don't have to assemble any of that, which is really, really nice. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and get it installed onto the test bench, and then we'll see how the temperatures compare. All right, so as you can see, I've got the air cooler hooked up. From this particular angle, I'm kind of showing you the gap that you have between the air cooler and the GPU, which is pretty standard. I mean, usually tower coolers like this can get pretty tall compared to your GPU. One thing to keep in mind though is the AMD mount, the way it is, the notches don't actually line up with the RAM. They go perpendicular to the RAM instead of this way. But one thing I can tell you, there's plenty of room with the fan mounted between the RAM right there anyway. So there's lots of room right there. And as you can see, we've got the fan set up as a push config, which is the proper way to do an air cooler. If you're running a single fan like that, way it can push all the air through. So let's go ahead and get it fired up. I'm using the thermal paste that came with it. So let's go and get it fired up and see what the temps look like without changing any of the settings. So I'm gonna fire this one up in real time. The thing with air coolers versus water coolers is the fact that the temperatures equalize much faster with an air cooler than water. Water, it takes time for all the water inside the system to reach equilibrium with the load at which the heat exchanger is having to deal with. I want to point out the idle temps. A lot of people freak out with Ryzen thinking that their idle is way too high. Remember that Ryzen is under the most voltage when it's actually at idle. And then once you go full load, the voltage actually comes down. So that's one thing I want to point out. We were sitting at about 50 to 52 under idle conditions before, where now we're at about 56, 57. So I just wanted to sort of show that, and then we're going to start the test in real time right here and see what it shoots up to the second the test starts. 60, 61. Holy cow, look at this. 4.3 on all cores. That's like 10C lower. What? Oh man, so we're at 63, 64. Okay, we'll just kind of let this go for a minute and see where it equalizes here. I can feel the air coming through the cooler. The fan's at full speed. That's quite unexpected. If you compare the Ryzen master numbers too to the previous run with the AIO, we're at 433 all core right now, where before we were like 425. So we're actually boosting a little higher. The temps creeped up to 66, 65. That's normal. Yeah, we're just gonna let this go for a minute because I gotta tell you right now, you can't really see it too well. This thing with only a push fan on there right now is legitimately surprising the hell out of me. So it's at 67, I can feel warmth. That means we're definitely transferring heat. So that means that my fears about it not, those gaps in the heat pipes are clearly unfounded because, look at our temps right here, 66. All right, so it's been going now for a little bit longer. Everything pretty much just jumped up 1 degree over that amount of time. Now instead of being 65, 66, it goes 66, 67, and then it will every now and then like barely scrape 68 and come back down. That's clearly lower than we were getting with the AIO, the Fractal Design AIO, which is really odd. Makes me wonder if I had a weird mount or something on there. Regardless, we were maintaining higher boost clocks at over 4.3, where before we were just over 4.2. So yeah, this little guy right here, 35 bucks on Amazon. You guys will find a link down below. So just to sort of wrap up this video, a simple Phillips screwdriver is all it took to put it together. It uses a very similar clip retention system to Noctua for holding the fan on. The fan's color is nice and bright, very vivid. It's ARGB, so it will match whatever pattern you plug it into for whatever 3-pin ARGB controller you use, whether it be Mystic Light, Asus Aura, whatever Gigabyte uses. And the installation was extremely easy. It uses the same AMD backplate that comes with all of your AMD motherboards, so you don't have to worry about that. The retention system's already together, 4 screws, squeeze the thermal paste. I did 3 lines. That sounds really wrong. I did 3 paste lines on there, which went perpendicular to the tubes, which the way that the cooler's currently turned, that seems to work pretty well. And it's doing an amazing job at keeping the system cool. It's sitting right now at 68 degrees with Cinebench just looping over and over and over. In fact, we've boosted a little bit higher. I showed you guys earlier, it was like 4.32. Now it's at 4.388. This just goes to show you guys never really know what you could be missing out on if you only shop some of the major name brands that are out there. And I mean, I don't know what design this is based off of. A lot of the cheap Amazon stuff is based off of like OEMs that make stuff for other brands. It looks very similar to a Noctua product. I don't know if it is, but I'm telling you right now, it cools. I mean, you can see the results right here. We've not hit 70 degrees even once. We're maintaining a higher boost clock than we were with my AIO, and it's doing a phenomenal job at keeping this 5900X cool with 1 fan. If we were doing a push-pull, it would probably be even a little bit better. So there you go. You guys will find a link down in the description below. I don't get any kickbacks or anything. It is linking to my Amazon affiliate, but I like to go hunting for this cheap stuff because I feel like people more often than not will just scrimp on a cooler and not realize there is extra performance to be had and better temperatures to be had than just using standard box coolers, and you don't have to spend $100+ on an AIO or an expensive air cooler to get it done. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe if you're new around here. Don't forget about our GPU giveaway that's going to be ending here in a couple of weeks. You guys will learn more about that right here. Hey you, before you click off this video, you may or may not be aware, I'm actually doing a worldwide graphics card giveaway where one winner will get to choose either a 6800 XT Merc 319 card from XFX or a 2080 Ti MSI Gaming X Trio from Team NVIDIA. So if you're sitting there right now going, I didn't know about this, how do I enter? Follow the description down below. You guys will find a link to the giveaway video that will give you all the details. Don't wait, because it really sucks to find out about these after they're over. What's up guys, Jayztwocents here and continuing on with